Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Thunderstock Show. It's a collection of valuable brainstorms to enhance your life, liberty, and pursuit of property. This season is all about EOS implementers, talking about how to work on your business, not just in it, and taking the People Analyzer tool, the GWC, Get It, Want It, Has Capacity, and using it to approach the right fit for not just your team, but your client roster. Today's special guest is Beth Fahey. Beth is out of the Chicago, Illinois area. Beth is a fellow podcaster, as well as one of the people who started the Great Boss workshops. So if you're out there listening and you have some cringy stories about being a boss, I have just the guest for you. Beth, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Ross. Thanks for having me.
So when in your career did you decide, you know what, being an implementer is the right seat for me?
Well, to go all the way back, I had a bakery business that implemented EOS in 2014, and we had an implementer, Clark Neuhoff. And the joke I say now is that, I watched Clark do it and I thought, how hard can it be? And the truth is that I thought it was a really hard job. I actually marveled at his ability to ask great questions, to lead our team to a collective answer. And I thought, wow, that is really cool, like what he does. And so, truth be told, I was probably deconstructing what he was doing while we were having our sessions way back then. And then we got to a point where we graduated essentially from the EOS process, and I started running our quarterlies and annuals in our bakery business. And my sister said, you're doing a great job with this. It seems like you really love to do this. And I thought, you know what? I actually do. And as much as I was chiding Clark early on, like, how hard can this be? I started learning it firsthand. And so then I kind of accidentally started becoming an EOS implementer because at the time that I became an implementer, which was 2018, it was a licensing agreement, not a
Mhm.
franchise. And I was able to join Basecamp and pay for Basecamp and start basically implementing right out of Basecamp. And so that's what I did for a lot of my friends in the baking industry initially. And I gave myself a runway of a year to figure out if this is actually what I wanted to do before I left my bakery. And I did.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, specifically to the People Analyzer tool with capacity. Think inherently your sister gave you feedback, you knew, like, yeah, this kind of feels right. Like I can do this. And then it seemed like you wanted to do it, it's something that you respected in Clark. But
Mhm.
then you gave yourself a year. You didn't judge your day one, Beth. You're like, all right, let's do a full year, right? Because
Yeah.
good things take time. And I think for a lot of people, if it doesn't happen in a week or a month or a quarter, it's like, all right, this isn't it. And they don't give themselves enough time
Right.
to kind of fill the seat. So it's a cool story. And then after 1 year, did it click? And you're like, hey, mission accomplished. We're in.
No, I think I knew right away that this is
Hmm.
where I wanted to go. And I started having conversations with my sister about my exit from the business. And, it was coming anyway. It was my sister and I ran a great business. We grew, we X that business in a very short period of time, but there was a ceiling to it. And the next stage of growth meant we would go to multiple locations and things like that. And honestly, my sister was not interested in getting any bigger. And I'm a visionary. I wasn't interested in status quo.
Mm.
So it became for us to keep and maintain a very strong, healthy relationship, considering we were business partners, equal business partners, it was better for me to just go do something else. Because for me, it was my seventh career. I mean, I had done a lot of different things prior to owning a bakery. And
Hmm.
so I wasn't worried about my future. I was concerned at the time, being 50 and saying, I'm going to change my career again. And there's a certain amount of risk becoming an implementer too. I mean, you have to build a business from scratch, essentially. So I knew I had, I guess, the confidence to find clients and leverage my network. So I wasn't really worried, but there was some trepidation. I mean, reinventing yourself at 50 is not for the meek of heart, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting point, right? Because it's not just like taking another job, it's starting another business at 50.
Yeah. And it's risking your savings.
Absolutely. It's an entrepreneurial operating system with with every EOSI being their own entrepreneur. So,
Right.
with your experience 10xing the bakery business, obviously there, I'm not sure this was part of your marketing plan, but it might have been where you could say, "Hey, try our product, taste it, use your own senses, potential customer. Tell me what you think." Right? You can't really do that as an EOSI, or can you? And
Mm-mm.
how is it different to sort of get going, take flight with getting customers working on your business as an EOSI versus, the brick and mortar like bakery service business you had?
So, I mean, I wanna say this with I hope not sounding egotistical, but I've always had an ability to think strategically and think long term, right, and see patterns. So even as I was thinking about leaving my bakery business, I was also doing speaking gigs within the baking industry that
Mm,
telegraphed my next chapter.
gotcha.
And so I gave some talks around Right People, Right Seat. I think I had one called Death by Meeting. And basically, I was teaching EOS concepts in disguise to a bunch of
Yeah.
bakers because I truly did want to help them because I saw there was a lot of struggling in the baking industry. And because I was the president of the National Trade Association for Retail Bakers, I had a lot of opportunities to speak.
Huh.
So to say that I didn't think long term, like how this would play out and how I would leverage the network, I wasn't like in a, I hope not a creepy way, targeting my fellow bakers. They just ended up coming to me after a speaking opportunity and saying, "Could you tell me more about this system?"
Well, and I think that's fun, not egotistical in my for whatever my opinion is worth, Beth. I think it was smart, right? Because whether it's people that are just starting a business or they're 10 years in, they're trying to get a grip on their business from a marketing perspective. I'm always like, well, who are your customers? Well, we help everybody. Anyone that
Mhm,
has a problem that will give us money. I'm like, okay,
mhm.
well, let's stop there. You're not Walmart. I think they're unique in that anybody could, walk in. What typically happens is you ask a series of questions like, "What's your experience? What are your interests? What associations are you in? Prior career, yada yada yada." But for you, like you sort of took flight with being an industry thought leader or authority, and we're like, "Hey, it's worked for me. Use your own business as a case study. What better marketing collateral
Mhm.
do you have than saying the proof's in the pudding? This is the case. Like I can speak about because I live this."
Yeah.
Uh, what advice do you have for people, whether they're aspiring EOSIs or they want to, maybe make that leap at, 40, 50, 60, start a new thing
Mhm.
on leveraging their prior careers, their prior lives in their corporate life?
Well, the first thing that I think anybody who's entertaining the idea of being an EOS implementer is you have to have a network. You have to have people that you can call and say, "Hey, I'm going to be doing something new in the future. I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind meeting with me for coffee, or maybe you'd like to have a 90-minute meeting," and so on. So just from the get-go, you need to have a network of people. You have to have entrepreneurial experience. You can't teach a bunch of entrepreneurs about an entrepreneurial operating system if you haven't bled the blood, if you haven't sweat through payroll, if you haven't hired that toxic employee, if you haven't, laid up at 2 o'clock in the morning thinking about the changing industry that you happen to be in, then you don't have enough credibility with that potential target market. Right. So you have to have that credibility. You have to have a high degree of emotional intelligence. This work is not for the faint of heart, right? I mean, if you are working with a leadership team, yes, I should say, yes, you're a teacher of an operating system called EOS. You're a facilitator, you're facilitating the conversations in the room, and you're a coach. You're helping people, helping coach them through this process. And the resistance to change and all the things that they're going to encounter. But truth be told, you have to have your own level of introspection. You need to have done the work yourself because you're about to work with people who now need to do the work if they haven't yet. And so if you've got a target market client, people that are open and honest, these are leaders that are willing to be vulnerable, understand that they might have been part of the problem from the beginning. When you talk to them about doing that work, You have to come from a place of shared experience and saying, "Yeah, I know what this feels like," right?
Yeah. Yeah. You can't fake the scars of experience and you can't fake the empathy of understanding.
Right. And
Hmm.
they're going through a tremendous amount of change during this process. There's a lot of resistance in their companies. They're feeling a little bit like an imposter because they know they're not probably a great boss. They probably haven't communicated their vision, to the degree that they should have. And it feels like flavor of the month to them. They're bringing EOS into an organization, and people are like, okay, did you go to a seminar? Like, did you read a book? And they're just waiting for the next. And so these folks need help. And so being kind of a business therapist and
Mm.
helping them through that is also what you need to be prepared for. This is not a get rich quick thing. It's you've got to really want to help these people.
The change management of the emotional state of the fellow leadership team is something that I haven't heard that perspective of when it's like
Mm,
gearing up for EOSI. But it brings me back to like my own experience in 2018 when I was in the leadership team and I was the least experienced, you know, apple in the bunch. Like, I've never led anyone or managed anyone before. I was just happy to be invited. Like, all right, I got
yeah,
promoted. Let's make sure I don't stink, like,
right.
or in hindsight, stink less, right? That was the
Mhm.
goal. But anyway, the more experienced people in the team were like, all right, boss, what YouTube video did you see this week, or what book did you read last weekend? And it was probably until the first 90 days that was really our facility or implementer did an awesome job. But it did take 90 days for people to be, oh, this is the new normal.
Mm,
So you had mentioned a lot of things that were helpful to take flight. But the first thing you said was gotta build a network. Not you didn't say have a network. You said build a network. And I think people sometimes don't look at that as an asset in which you can appreciate and grow. What about your background in film and public speaking? Well, you went to school, you have a degree in film,
mhm.
but what about that public speaking or being on camera, being on stage helped you to both hone your skills with being an implementer and being like on stage and also like building a network?
Yes, I mean, back in my 20s, I was a camera assistant and I worked on
Mm,
movies like Groundhog Day, Twin Peaks. I did a lot of the late 80s, early 90s kind of stuff. And
get
I lived
out.
in I lived in Hollywood, and that town is about networking. And at that time, the only social media didn't exist. Smartphones were non-existent. You had a
Mhm.
landline. Somebody gave me their phone book, and I went to the Kinko's next door and made a copy of this guy's black book of all of the directors of photography in town. And I had to pick up the phone and say, "Hi, my name is Beth. I'm a new camera assistant in town from Chicago. I worked at Victor Duncan," and start looking for jobs that way. And that's how you get started. And it's all word of mouth, and it's all about how you behave on the set. So it was a meritocracy back in the
Mm.
80s and 90s. And you got work by showing up on time, by working really hard, and being smart and pleasurable to work with, which meant that you had to be good at small talk and you had to learn how to have a conversation with a very famous actor or a very famous director sometimes. And so, I mean, it was a great training ground for me because I just learned how to be an adult in a very short period of time. And because it was gig work, I was only as good as my last job. So I had to really pay attention to my reputation.
So there is a degree of similarity between that building of a network and
Mhm.
being whether it's a EOS implementer, whether it's whatever, an entrepreneur. That's an entrepreneurial first gig. Interesting.
Yeah, and I think that the other thing that's interesting about that I draw parallels to my past is when you're working on a movie set, that is a collaborative art project.
Mhm.
There are 50, 60 people on the crew working towards one goal. It's not just the actor making that movie. I mean, there's a bunch of people in the background that are bringing their own piece to it. When you're building a business, it's the same thing. It is a collaborative art form, building a business. And so why I gravitated towards entrepreneurship after, I had my kids and came back into the workforce was because one, I didn't think I was employable. I had worked in the corporate world for like a summer at my doing data entry with my dad at Swift Eckrich, and I wanted to gouge my eyes out. It was awful. Like, there was no way that I was going back into corporate.
Very
No way.
obvious wrong seat for you.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so it had to be interesting and exciting. There had to be a certain amount of drama. I mean, I was a theater kid. I mean, so learning how to speak, I was in debate club. I mean, like, all of these things that didn't feel like real skills back in the 80s when everybody was just thinking about how do I make money. Those are skills that actually are paying off in a big way for me at this point in my life.
I would say Acting 101 was one of the most useful classes I took in college out of all of them because if you had stage fright or you were unprepared, everybody knew. And like nothing is as terrifying as failing public speaking,
Yeah.
I think.
If you had I mean, even starting this process, becoming an EOS implementer, even though I had implemented it in my own business, I was extremely familiar with what EOS was. Learning how to teach it and watching the videos over and over again, which is how we get trained. One of the ways we get trained, but it's the predominant way that we get trained at the beginning. And these videos were done by Mike Payton, who is
Hmm.
an unbelievable speaker, and just his skill set in setting up segues and teaching the 90-minute meeting and things like that. We had such a great role model to watch, and, you know, learning how to do that with your own style then is part of the happens afterwards. So there was a lot of work in preparing to be able to do these sessions.
So you've worked alongside some pretty magnanimous or larger than life personalities like Bill Murray, right? Groundhog Day.
Mhm.
But visionaries in their own respect can have some pretty wild personalities. So how did working with these like movie stars in Hollywood was there any similarities between like running a room and keeping order on the set, right? In the EOS room? Because it sounds like that was a very unique skill that did serve you well in your later.
I'll just say I am not a stranger to a big ego or narcissistic behavior. And, I know that sounds I don't wanna put all visionaries in that category because most visionaries are lovely and they're they're my ADD brothers and sisters. I mean, because, I am one of them, right? So, but there were a lot of big personalities and there was a lot of not so great behavior on the film set. And honestly, I think that's what got me so interested in leadership from the get go. When I would see a director who behaved badly and how that affected the crew and how that made everybody feel, and you felt like you were in prison for 3 months until the show was over.
Mm.
And then there were other directors that I worked with, Robert Altman, David Lynch, some real
Yeah.
auteurs who were unbelievably talented and kind
Mm.
and lovely and had great sets. And Harold Ramis was amazing. Those folks, it's when I realized, and I thought I invented this at the time, but I used to say the director is the barometer of the set. How their mood is affects everybody else on the set. And if they're a hot mess, it's going to be a hot mess of a show. If they're calm, they leverage their team, they're interested in what other people have to say, they're not the smartest person in the room, that's a great show. And that's what I would say that all of those directors held. And it's what I see in all of the great leaders that I see in my session rooms. It's the ones that are collaborative, the ones that are the people that don't have to be the smartest person in the room, that surround themselves with a strong team. It's the ones that are concerned about the culture and are really making sure that people are living the culture. Those are the companies that do the best and have the greatest employee retention because who doesn't want to work at a place like that?
It just amazes me that you worked alongside. So David Lynch, in my opinion, is like on the Mount Rushmore for
Yeah,
like
he's
film.
great. Yeah.
He's great. But not only is his work great, what you shared is that he's just like a great person to work with.
Oh my God, he was
And
amazing.
like I would put him up there with some of the smartest like creatives in that genre for whatever my opinion's worth, right? As an amateur critic.
Mhm.
But he didn't come across as I'm the greatest, right? So there's this like duality between like the most successful, some of the best or willing to improve, have humility and work well with others and make sure the vibe of the set's in good shape. Like that's contributing factors to their greatness, not just being really smart.
Yeah.
So I have to ask, how did you, after several years being in EOSI, decide, you know what, I'm going to pick up the microphone and the headset, and we're going to start this, the Great Boss. I forget the title of your podcast, but the Great Boss podcast, where people share their cringy boss
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah. So Bad Boss Confessional was
That's it.
born out of Great Boss workshops.
Mhm.
I was fortunate enough to co-create those with Renee Boer, who wrote the book, How to Be a Great Boss with Gino Wickman. And so Renee and I started doing the workshops online back in 2020 during COVID because, we had to switch everything over at that point. And so because I had a film background and because I'm kind of a natural marketing sort of person, I was, the yin to his yang. And we developed those together. And I think we did about close to 30 of them together. And one of the things that we noticed was when people would get on and, we would share during the breakouts, or people would share their stories, or we would honestly listen in while they were having their breakouts. People would confess these things to each other in the breakouts. And you could tell that they felt a lot of shame around it. They felt bad around it. And they wished they could rewrite history and just go back and fix whatever they had done that was wrong. And I thought, wow, there's something here. And so I said to Renee, I said, we should set up on these online, we should have a special breakout called the Confessional, and we should let people just go there and like sit with you or something and confess their sins.
That's like this genius, like theater kid. Like
Yeah.
I could just imagine your younger self being like, yes.
Yeah. And Renee was like, "Yeah, no, we're not doing that." And I'm like, "No, there's an idea here. There's an idea here." And so anyway, long story short, after I'd been doing the Great Boss workshops for a while, I just thought, you know what? I want to give people a venue where they can talk about this stuff, because the concern that I have, like the real driver for me, is seeing young managers and leaders really struggling right now. They are not wanting to lead and manage. They have a lot of head trash around the current bosses that they have. Okay, boomer.
Mm.
I'm a Gen X, older Gen X person. And sometimes I feel like I'm out of touch with, what their concerns are. And I just saw this divide and I thought, you know what? Here's the thing. Here's the secret, is that every older leader and manager is still working on themselves, and nobody's got this figured out. We're all just bumbling along and trying to figure it out and making mistakes. And so why don't we just create a space where we can talk about that stuff and normalize it, as opposed to pretending that we've got all our shit together, because nobody's got it
Mm.
together.
So you're entering the danger out loud, like in public on air, right?
Yeah,
Like
and
that's what
and
it's
for
all about, isn't it? Vulnerabilities to build trust.
right, because what is the one hallmark of a great leader and manager is that they're willing to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And so if you can be vulnerable and share your story, you're working on that muscle. You're also working on empathy. You're working on wanting to help somebody by learning through your experience. And so, I just discovered actually this morning that most of our listeners are between 25 and 35 years old, and mostly male, which I found really interesting because I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting that the only people that listen to my podcast were other implementers, but it's not the case. And to me, that says that people want this content. They want to learn from other people and know that they're not alone and feeling like a loser as a leader or manager, or young leader or manager.
So I want to ask about present day 2026. So you've already shared some key nuggets of that for me, I am going to have to leave this podcast and like really take a clarity break. Like, let me take an inventory about like building the network and like the thesis behind the show and how it's kind of been created, which is awesome. But what are some of the things you're doing this year to work on your business? Whether that looks like getting more clients, getting the right clients, maybe making more time for other stuff. I don't know what
Yeah.
working on your business looks like, but what does it look like to you this year?
Well, this year, I didn't mention this earlier, but I'll mention it now. I wrote a book with Marissa Smith called Rollout, and it's about how to roll EOS out into your organization. It is basically the how to for traction. So you decide that you're going to roll EOS out into your organization, whether you're self implementing or working with an implementer. This is walking you through what that looks like, what to prepare for. You're going to run into resistance and how you manage that, how you put together a plan, how you launch, how you integrate it, and how you eventually sustain it in your organization. So it's essentially a reference book for anybody running on EOS. And even if you rolled out a couple, 3 years ago, you can go back and get something out of it. And so I'll be speaking at the EOS conference about rollout. I'll also be doing a breakout on quarterly conversations at the EOS conference. And so that's next month, and that's kind of got my attention right now. But for the rest of the year, it's about getting out with the rollout book and promoting that with Marissa Smith. And also, Chicago, we're putting on our own sort of a mini conference in the fall. And so I'm involved in that and making that happen.
I go back to the theater and like the acting background. And it's like, you're not just like you're on stage, you're cool with being on camera and being on stage, but you're also like, I have a friend that they got married in college. One was the stage crew manager and one was like the lead actor. And I feel like you got both in you, where like you have the off stage, like the organization, the how to, the very, process
Yeah.
driven. And then you're also like, oh yeah, I'm speaking at these huge conferences. Like, good for you. That
Yeah.
that rules.
Yeah. I have a weird Colby. I'm a 6'6", 7'2". So I can
What?
kind of build my own thing and do it. And that is my blessing and my curse.
I'm sure you have a practice manager or an admin that
I
helps with
do.
it too. There you
Yes.
go.
And she's amazing.
Yeah. I think I'm either a one or a two for follow through. So if it wasn't for help, I'd be toast.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, good for you.
I
I
learned
mean,
that the
that's
hard way.
great. But, it's not a bad thing, right?
No.
Because you can simplify and, organization doesn't rule your life. So, I mean, look, there are ends of the spectrum, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And Kathy Colby will tell you that your Colby is perfect.
Oh, yeah. Perfect score, 100%. No, but jokes aside, I just really appreciate the insight and the stories, Beth, because, some of the stuff I got out of it was, it's like, take what you know really well and just like what you care about. Sometimes it's ooh, let's get these juicy cringe, like the drama stories. Like there's an audience for that. And it's people like Ross, like me, 25 to 35, leaders that don't want to stink at their job. But
That's right.
I love hearing the stories of just like the best people in showbiz are the nicest. So don't be afraid to pick up the phone and call. So
Mhm.
very cool. Last question is not super deep, but it is, how can people learn more, get in touch? How should they connect?
Yeah, so I have a website that's independent of EOS Worldwide, bethfahey.com. Super easy. Just my name.com, Beth Fahey. And all the stuff that I'm doing is there. You can also
Very
find me on
cool.
LinkedIn. I love to connect with people on LinkedIn. I'm going to be speaking at the EOS conference. So if anybody's at the EOS conference, find me and love to chat. I like to be involved in collaborating. So if you're in the Chicago area, look forward to seeing people at that conference there as well.
Very cool. Well, thank you, Beth. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Again, I don't run ads to the show, but please share this with a friend if you think they'd find it valuable. Until next time, be well.